If you're over 60 with no savings, you are not behind. You are in an emergency. You don't need motivation. You need triage. The financial world will lie to you about this. It will say things like it's never too late, and you've got plenty of time to catch up because that fantasy keeps you docile and selling you things remains profitable. But arithmetic does not care about your feelings or the slogans on retirement ads. Arithmetic says you are running out of both time and options. The only question left is whether you will confront that now while you still have some capacity to act, or wait until reality makes the decision for you. I'm not interested in comforting you. I'm interested in keeping you from becoming completely helpless. There's a difference. Munger once said, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. After 60, that's not a witty line, it's a protocol. You don't have enough runway left to get rich. You may not have enough runway left to get comfortable. But you do have enough time to avoid the absolute worst outcomes: destitution, permanent dependency, and total loss of dignity. The way you do that is not by chasing some miracle return. It's by systematically removing the mistakes that will finish you off. First, we need to look at your situation without lying. Suppose you're 62. You've reached what they call early retirement age in the brochures. You probably feel nothing like retired. You may still be working. You may already be out of work, voluntarily or not. But the key variable isn't what you feel. It's how long you're likely to be alive. A 62-year-old today can easily live another 20 or more years. Living to 82 or 85 is not a fantasy. It's the base case. That means you're staring at something like 2 more decades of needing food, shelter, medicine, heat, and some margin for bad luck, whether or not you have the savings to cover it. Now translate that into money. Say you could live on $30,000 a year. Modest by any standard, especially with rising medical costs. Over 20 years, that's $600,000. If your target lifestyle is $40,000 a year, it's $800,000. If you want $50,000, it's $1 million. Notice something? The capital requirements don't care how late you started. They don't shrink just because you don't like the numbers. That's the first shock most people over 60 refuse to absorb. They keep their old idea of what normal life should cost and try to duct tape it onto a balance sheet that doesn't exist. Then they look for an investment strategy that will somehow close a $500,000 gap in 10 years. That's not investing. That's begging for a Lollapalooza of stupidity. If you're sitting at 60 or 65 with little or nothing saved, the market is not your primary problem. Your time horizon and your behavior are. You are too old to gamble and too young to pretend you can't do anything. That's the worst possible combination. It leads people into exactly the wrong actions. They panic, they feel ashamed, and then they reach for whatever promises to catch them up quickly. Crypto, options, day trading, real estate schemes with leverage they don't understand, high-fee products sold by smooth talkers who can see your fear. It's like a man with heart disease trying to cure it by sprinting up the stairs. You don't dig out of a late life hole by getting clever. You dig out by applying a brutally simple emergency protocol. In medicine, protocol in emergency room doesn't start with fancy surgery. It starts with ABC, airway, breathing, circulation, basic survival. Money is no different. If you're over 60 with no savings, your version of ABC is stop the bleeding, stabilize your cash flow, then slowly build a minimum dose of capital that can share the load with your labor and whatever social safety net exists. Notice the order. There is no step that says swing for the fences. There's a step that says stop hitting yourself in the head with a hammer. Start with inversion. Don't ask, how could I still get rich from here? That's the wrong question. Ask, from where I am now, what sequence of decisions would almost guarantee I end up old, broke, and powerless? The answers are not mysterious. Keep spending like nothing is wrong. Keep debt alive. Refuse to downsize anything. Pretend work will always be there. Trust high return promises from strangers. Ignore your health. Refuse to talk honestly with your family. That's your path to a catastrophic old age. And millions of people walk it every year convinced they're just being optimistic. Now flip it. If those are the moves that guarantee failure, your emergency protocol is simply, don't do them. From 60 onward, the game is less about what to add and more about what to subtract. Subtract illusions about your current lifestyle being sustainable. Subtract any debt that charges interest like a loan shark. Subtract the idea that you're entitled to stop working just because you hit a certain birthday. Subtract complex investments you don't understand. Subtract financial denial. The habit of never adding up the numbers because you're afraid of what they'll say. Munger called this approach avoiding stupidity instead of seeking brilliance. At your age, avoiding stupidity is 90% of the ballgame. Look at the math of no savings more closely. Often it isn't literally zero. It's that everything you own is either illiquid, over-leveraged, or misallocated. Equity locked in a too large house. A couple of small retirement accounts rated repeatedly. Spare cash sitting in a checking account earning nothing. The first step of your protocol is to force all of that onto one page. Not in your head, on paper. All debts, all assets, all income sources, all fixed expenses. If you can't stand to do that, you're not ready for an emergency protocol. You're still in fantasy camp. Suppose that exercise reveals what you already suspected. There is a big gap between what you've been spending and what your likely late life income can support. That gap isn't going to be filled by compounding because you don't have a base to compound. It's going to be filled, or not filled, by two levers. how long and how much you can work, and how ruthlessly you can cut your required cost of being alive. That won't sell books, but it's the truth. Social Security or whatever public pension exists in your country is a factor, but treat it as a floor, not a solution. If your projected benefit is $1,500 or $2,000 a month, and you've been living as if you'll have $4,000 or $5,000, there is your math problem. There is no portfolio trick that turns $0 into a $3,000 monthly supplement in a few years without terrifying levels of risk. So the emergency protocol asks different questions. What does it cost per month to keep you housed, fed, clothed, and insured at the most basic level that preserves dignity? How different is that from the life you're living now? How quickly can you move from the latter to the former? This is where ego does the most damage. A man who spent 40 years building a certain image does not like hearing that he needs to sell the big house, ditch the luxury car, and move into something modest. He does not like the idea of sharing a place, or relocating to a cheaper area, or taking on work he once considered beneath him. So he pretends none of that is necessary. He keeps every fixed expense exactly where it is, because downgrading feels like defeat. Then, a decade later, he discovers that the landlord, the bank, and the grocery store don't care about his pride. They care about cash. If you are over 60 with no savings, your pride is too expensive. The emergency protocol begins by declaring war on any expense that exists to prop up your image, rather than your survival. The country club membership, the second car, the spare bedroom you never use, the vacations you take to forget how anxious you actually are. All of that is opportunity cost in its purest form. Every dollar you refuse to free up now is a dollar that can't be turned into capital. And every year you delay that conversion is another tick of the clock in the wrong direction. You might think all this sounds bleak. It is. Being broke at 25 is a story. Being broke at 65 is a sentence. But there is a difference between a hard truth and a hopeless one. The hard truth is that you cannot, from this position, buy the retirement lifestyle you saw in commercials. The hopeful truth is that you can still move yourself from one market dip away from disaster to modest, survivable old age, if, and only if, you're willing to treat your situation like the emergency it is, instead of a bad dream you'll wake up from. There is one more mental model you need to tape to your forehead: margin of safety. In investments, it means not paying full price for something so that errors and bad luck don't destroy you. In your life at 60, it means you cannot afford to run your finances with no buffer and no plan. You need a margin of safety in your monthly cash flow. You need a margin of safety in your housing costs. You need a margin of safety in your schedule so you can actually hold the job, or jobs you'll likely need. The days of winging it are over. The margin is already thin. So from here forward, you think like a man in a burning building, not like a tourist who lost his map. You stop arguing with the fire. You stop yelling at the architect. You find the exits you still have, and you move. That means new work, if you can get it, cheaper living if you can stand it, the absolute annihilation of every high-interest debt, and the construction from scratch of a small base of capital that can grow while you keep breathing. It will not be glamorous. It will not impress anyone. It will simply keep you from being completely at the mercy of other people. What that looks like in detail, and what it demands from you in the years you have left, is the rest of the protocol. Most won't follow it. They'll wait for a miracle. But miracles are a terrible retirement plan. Arithmetic is better, even when it hurts. So what do you actually do Monday morning? Not in theory, in reality. You're 60 plus, scared, maybe ashamed, trying not to think about it. The protocol starts with something that feels small and humiliating, but is absolutely non-negotiable. You count. You sit down with every bank statement, every credit card bill, every pay stub, every pension estimate, every social security projection, every insurance premium, and you build a picture of your life in numbers, not vibes, numbers. Monthly after-tax income, monthly fixed costs, minimum debt payments, what you spend on food, utilities, transport, medicine, what's left, if anything. Until you do that, everything else is fantasy. That exercise will feel like ripping a bandage off a wound you've been pretending isn't there. Do it anyway. You might discover you're running a small deficit every month, plugging the hole with credit cards or help from relatives. You might find you're breaking even, but only because everything goes out the door the minute it comes in. What you almost certainly won't find is mystery savings hiding somewhere. There is no mystery. If you had savings, you wouldn't be listening to this. Once the numbers are on paper, you can answer the only question that matters at this stage. Is there any current surplus to work with? If the answer is no, your first job is not investing. It's manufacturing a surplus where none exists. That's emergency protocol step 1, stop the bleeding. You do that in 2 directions at once. Expenses down, income up. Not tomorrow. Now, on the expense side, you attack fixed costs first because they do the most damage. Housing, transport, debt payments, insurance premiums. Ask one brutal question about each. Would I keep this if I were already 80 and broke? If the answer is no, it's a candidate for the chopping block. That might mean selling a house you can't really afford to own and moving somewhere smaller or cheaper. It might mean moving out of a nice neighborhood into a merely adequate one. It might mean giving up the car you use to impress strangers and buying something that simply moves you from A to B. None of these moves feel good. They feel like regression. But they create something you've never had before. Room in the equation. Every $500 you free up each month is not just $500. Over a year, it's $6,000. Over 10 years, with even modest investment returns, it can become $80,000, $100,000. That's the difference between having no capital at 70 and having a small but meaningful war chest. The man who insists I can't possibly downsize is really saying my pride is worth more than a six-figure difference in my old age. That's not a financial decision. That's vanity. On the income side, you accept an unpleasant truth. Whatever fantasy you had about being done with work at 60 is over. Your new retirement age is when the math says you can afford not to work, not when your peers start playing golf. That might be 70. It might be 75. It might be never, in the sense of completely stopping. The sooner you stop fighting that reality, the sooner you can make intelligent decisions about what kind of work you can still do, for how long, and under what conditions. At this stage, the right question is not, what job do I want? It's, what can I sustainably do for 10, 15 more years that produces cash? You may have to swallow your pride and take roles below your previous status. You may have to work part-time in something physically easier but steady. You may have to pick up contract or gig work that younger you would have scorned. You're not building a resume anymore. You're building runway. Cash flow is oxygen. Without it, there is no compounding, no plan, just slow suffocation. Once you've created some surplus, any surplus, the protocol shifts from pure defense to controlled offense. You need an emergency buffer first. Not because cash yields are exciting, but because without a buffer, every hiccup knocks you back to zero. Aim for 3 to 6 months of bare bones expenses sitting in something liquid and safe. If your stripped down life costs $2,000 a month, that's $6,000, $12,000. If it's $3,000, that's $9,000, $18,000. Until you have that, money you invest is really just money you'll be forced to yank out at exactly the wrong time when the car breaks or your hours get cut. A buffer turns those events from catastrophes into nuisances. It is your first, smallest margin of safety. Only when that buffer exists does capital building begin. At 60 plus, your first target is not $1 million. It's not even $500,000. It's a minimum dose. Call it $50,000 to $100,000. That can start sharing the burden with your body. Take a man who is 62, has managed to carve out $1,000 a month in surplus from a combination of cutting and working. That's $12,000 a year. If he builds his emergency buffer over, say, 2 years, then starts redirecting the $12,000 into a simple portfolio earning a realistic 6% net of inflation and friction, here's the math. From 64 to 74, 10 years of $12,000 contributions at 6% produces a pot of roughly $160,000. That's not a fortune, but it's not nothing. At a cautious 4% withdrawal rate in old age, that could provide $5,000, $6,000 a year, $400, $500 a month, on top of whatever Social Security and part-time work you have. Combine that with a low fixed cost lifestyle, and it can be the difference between one missed paycheck from disaster and barely, but survivable. If, instead of $12,000, he manages $18,000 a year by working more, cutting harder, the numbers change again. 10 years at $18,000 with a 6% return gets him closer to $240,000. Now 4% withdrawals generate $7,000, $9,000 a year, $600, $750 a month. Add that to Social Security and maybe a small pension, and you've built an income floor, not a palace, but something that can hold your life up without constant crisis. None of this happens if you refuse to brutally downshift your lifestyle and extend your working years. That is the central trade, less pride and comfort now in exchange for less fear and dependence later. The emergency protocol says that trade is not optional. You've already used up your easy years without building a base. You don't get those back. You only get to decide whether you'll waste the remaining ones the same way. Now, a word about Social Security, because for many over 60 with no savings, it will be the backbone of survival whether you like it or not. In the United States, claiming at 62 locks and a reduced benefit for life. Waiting until full retirement age, 66 or 67 depending on your birth year, increases it. Waiting until 70 increases it further, roughly 8% more for each year you delay past full retirement age. That's a guaranteed real increase from the government, not a maybe from the market. For a man with no savings, that trade-off is enormous. Suppose your full retirement benefit at 67 would be $2,000 a month. Claiming at 62 might drop it near $1,400, $1,500. Waiting until 70 might push it closer to $2,500, $3,000. The exact numbers depend on your history, but the direction is clear. If you can work, even imperfectly, into your late 60s and delay claiming, you are essentially buying an inflation-linked annuity from the government by continuing to grind. That bigger check for as long as you live is itself a form of capital. It reduces how much you need to pull from any small savings you manage to build. Of course, if you literally cannot work, health has failed, the job market has spat you out, you may have no choice but to claim early. Reality beats theory. But don't claim early just because you feel done or because your friends did. That 8% per year increase is one of the only truly favorable deals an undersaved older person is ever offered. The emergency protocol says explore every path that allows you to delay, because once you've locked in a low benefit, there's no going back. The same ruthless logic applies to housing. For most older people with no formal savings, the biggest asset they have is the house they live in. Sometimes it's fully paid. Often it still has a mortgage. Emotionally, the idea of selling it and moving into something smaller, cheaper, or rented feels like failure. Mathematically, it may be the only way to free up enough equity and reduce enough monthly costs to give compounding any room at all. A $400,000 house with a $100,000 mortgage and $1,800 monthly carrying cost mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance can be swapped for a $200,000 condo or rental at $1,000 a month. That move might free up $200,000 in equity and $800 in monthly cash flow. That's capital you never had and surplus you never saw. Do that at 65 and those freed up dollars can serve as both a cushion and an investment base. Put $100,000 of those proceeds to work in a simple portfolio. Keep the other $100,000 as a liquid buffer and potential medical fund. That $100,000 invested at 6% with modest withdrawals can support a few $100s a month of spending without eating itself too fast. It's not comfortable, but it beats sitting on two expensive walls you can't afford to heat while your bank account wheezes towards zero. You may not have a house to sell, you may be renting already, or living with family. In that case, the housing lever becomes about negotiation and humility. Can you move in with grown children under clear agreements, trading rent for childcare or housework, without becoming a parasite? Can you take in a roommate or two to share costs? Can you relocate entirely to a cheaper region, even a different country, where your meager income stretches further? None of these options are fun. They are better than sleeping in your car. Some people at this age fantasize about starting a business to solve their problem. Be very careful. A small, low-risk side business that leverages skills you already have. Consulting, tutoring, handyman work can be an excellent way to increase income. A debt finance venture into a field you don't understand is not entrepreneurship. It's self-destruction. Remember your circle of competence. At 60, with no savings, your circle does not include running a restaurant on borrowed money, flipping houses with no margin, or becoming a part-time venture capitalist because you watched a show about it. The emergency protocol says any business activity must be cash generative quickly and must not risk money you cannot afford to lose, sweat you can replace. Capital at your age, you can't. Now we come to a subject people in trouble almost always mishandle, family. If you're over 60 with no savings, odds are you have children, maybe grown, maybe still partly dependent. You may be helping them with money you do not have. You may be hiding your situation from them out of shame. Both behaviors are dangerous. The protocol demands honesty, but not self-pity. You sit your family down and tell them the truth. I did not prepare well. I am behind. I am making changes so that I do not become a full burden on you. That means we can no longer do X, Y, Z. X might be subsidizing their rent. Y might be paying for vacations. Z might be bailing them out of their own bad decisions. You stop doing it, not because you don't love them, but because the surest way to become their problem later is to keep pretending you're fine now. You also tell them what you are doing for yourself. Working longer, moving somewhere cheaper, cutting expenses, trying to build a small capital base. Some will be supportive. Some may be angry. That's their problem. Your job is not to maintain their fantasy of you as a bottomless provider. Your job is to survive in a way that doesn't destroy them in 10 years. If adult children truly care about you, they will adjust. If they don't, reality will adjust them later. Health is another unglamorous but decisive variable. At 60 plus, your body is either your ally or your executioner. If your health collapses, your ability to earn collapses with it, and your expenses explode. There is no compounding trick that fixes that. So part of the emergency protocol, unpleasant as it is triage on your own habits. If you're overweight, sedentary, smoking, drinking heavily, eating like a teenager, you are setting fire to the one asset you can't replace. Fixing that will not make you rich. It might, however, extend your workable years and reduce your medical bills enough to let your late life savings effort actually show up in your account instead of being siphoned into copays and prescriptions. Most people in your situation hate hearing this because it sounds like one more thing they've done wrong. Fine, hate it. Then do something anyway. Walk every day. Eat like someone who plans to be around in 10 years. Take the boring medical advice you've ignored. You don't need to become an athlete. You need to avoid becoming uninsurable and unemployable before your minimal plan has a chance to work. If all of this sounds like a long list of sacrifices, that's because it is. You squandered the easy path. The remaining path is steep, but stacked behind every sacrifice is real arithmetic. Every $200 of monthly spending you kill is $2,400 a year that can go to debt payoff, buffer, or capital. Over 10 years at 6%, that stream alone is over $30,000. Every extra year you delay claiming Social Security at 62 in favor of working, if you can, might add hundreds of dollars a month to your benefit for life. Over a 20-year retirement, that's tens of thousands of dollars more in present value terms. Every pound of weight you lose that keeps you off a handful of medications saves you hundreds or thousands per year in costs. Small levers, large effects, if you give them time. The illusion that kills people at this stage is the belief that because they can't have the ideal outcome, no outcome is worth fighting for. I'll never have $1 million, so why bother trying to build $100,000? Because there is a canyon of difference between old age with zero and old age with a cushion, even a thin one. Between living on one flimsy income stream you don't control and having two or three that share the load. Between having to say yes to every unpleasant demand because you are desperate, and having enough stability to say no once in a while. You may not be able to buy a happy ending. You can absolutely buy a less miserable one. What you cannot do is keep living exactly as you are and expect the universe to bail you out. The emergency protocol exists to give you a last, narrow bridge between no savings and total dependence. It is not wide. It is not comfortable. It is, however, real. And walking it requires that you give up the one thing you've been clinging to the hardest, the story that you'll figure it out later. Later is already here. From this point on, every year you spend in denial is a year compounding against you. The only remaining question is how quickly you can flip the equation so that, however modestly, time starts working with you instead of accelerating your decline. That means capital, however small. That means work, however unglamorous. That means sacrifice, however uncomfortable. There is no other door. In the final piece of this, we'll strip the protocol down to a short set of rules you can actually remember. And we'll walk through a few concrete example lives. A 60-year-old, a 65-year-old, and a 70-year-old. So you can see exactly what's still possible and exactly what isn't. Not according to hope, according to math. Let's make this concrete. Imagine three men. Same country, same basic rules of the game, different ages. One is 60, one is 65, one is 70. None of them has meaningful savings. The question is not who can retire like a television commercial. The question is, what does survival look like for each of them if they follow the protocol, and what does ruin look like if they don't? Take the 60-year-old first. He earns $60,000 a year before tax, about $4,000 a month after. Right now, he spends all of it, $1,500 on housing, $600 on a car and insurance, $700 on food, $500 on various bills and subscriptions, $700 on everything else. No savings, no investments, a couple thousand on a credit card that never quite gets to zero. If he does nothing, he coasts like this until his employer decides he's too old or too expensive. Then he falls straight onto a Social Security benefit of maybe $1,500, $1,800 a month at 62. His lifestyle costs far more than that. The gap gets filled with panic, begging, or both. That's his default path. Now watch what happens if he treats this as an emergency instead of a bad mood. He sells the car with the payments and buys something older for cash. Housing shrinks. A smaller apartment, a room in a shared house, or a cheaper area. He kills every non-essential bill. Maybe he picks up a couple of days a week doing something unglamorous but paid. Between cuts and added income, he finds $1,000 a month in surplus he never had. It's ugly. His friends think he's downsizing too much. He keeps going anyway. For the first 24 months, that $1,000 a month does not go into stocks. It goes into a cash buffer. Call it $12,000, $20,000. That turns every broken appliance and every gap in hours from a catastrophe into an inconvenience. Once that buffer is in place, he starts treating the $1,000 monthly as capital. From age 62 to 70, that's 8 years of $12,000 a year into a simple low-cost portfolio earning, say 6% after inflation and friction. The sequence matters. He doesn't skip years. He doesn't raid the account. 8 years at $12,000 with a 6% return grows to roughly $120,000, $130,000. Meanwhile, because he kept working, he didn't claim Social Security at 62. He waited. Maybe he waits to full retirement age at 67. Maybe, if his health holds and the work is bearable, he pushes to 70. That delay can easily turn a $1,500 potential benefit into $2,200 or more. At 70, he now has a government check that actually covers a large piece of his stripped-down life, plus a small but real capital base. At a cautious 3, 4% withdrawal rate, $125,000, can generate $4,000, $5,000 a year, $350, $400 a month, on top of Social Security. Combined with a low fixed cost of living, it's not luxury, it's survivable. The same man with the same starting point ends his life modest and independent instead of desperate and humiliated. The difference was not a miracle investment. It was a series of unpleasant decisions made when they could still move the needle. Now look at the 65-year-old. He earns less, say $40,000 a year, about $2,800 a month after tax. He's already been pushed out of his main career and is working part-time. His Social Security at full retirement age might be around $1,800 if he waits. At 65, he's nearly there. No savings. His current rent and expenses eat nearly everything. If he claims now, he locks in that $1,800 minus early claim penalties and loses the chance to build any capital. If he follows the protocol, he takes a different path. He cuts until his bare-bones monthly cost of living is, say, $2,000 instead of $2,800. That's a brutal 30% reduction. Smaller place, no car payment, no eating out, no financial support to adult children, nothing that doesn't keep him alive and functional. He pushes himself back to full-time or close to it at whatever honest work he can get, even if it's far below his former status. Between the lower expenses and slightly higher income, he frees $500, $700 a month. For the first year, that goes into a small emergency fund, perhaps $6,000, $8,000. After that, from 66 to 72, he channels $6,000, $8,000 a year into a simple portfolio at 6% return. 10 years of $6,000 contributions at 6% yields around $80,000. At $8,000, closer to $110,000. If he can delay claiming Social Security from 65 to 70, his benefit might climb from, say, $1,600 to over $2,200. At 72, he might have $2,200 in Social Security, plus $250, $350 a month he can reasonably pull from the portfolio, plus a bit of part-time income if his health allows. It's tight, but it's a very different ending from the man who claimed early, refused to downsize, and arrived at 75 with nothing but a shriveled check and unpaid bills. Finally, look at the 70-year-old with no savings. Here the brutal truth is this: time has taken compounding off the table as a primary tool. 10 years of careful saving and 6% returns from 70 to 80 can still build a small cushion, but it will not transform his life. The emergency protocol for him is almost entirely about income and cost control. If he has not yet claimed Social Security, he should do so now. The 8% yearly boost for delaying only runs to 70. If he has already claimed early, the benefit is what it is. The main levers left are: work as much as his health allows, cut costs as deeply as he can tolerate, avoid any new debt like poison, and build even a modest buffer to keep one bad month from cascading into homelessness. If a 70-year-old finds a way to generate $500 of surplus monthly through shared housing, part-time work, and ruthless expense cuts, that's $6,000 a year. Put that aside for 5 years in very safe vehicles, and he has $30,000. Invested cautiously, maybe it grows a little. It won't make him rich. It will let him pay for a car repair, a dental procedure, a move, without going to pieces. For him, the point of capital is not return. It's discretion. The power to say no, at least sometimes, instead of yes, to every degrading dependency. No protocol can turn back the clock. It can only give him a slightly less brutal future than the one he has already earned. Those 3 lives are not hypothetical dreams. They're arithmetic sketches of what is still possible if you start where you are at those ages and do the things you don't want to do. In each case, the emergency protocol is the same pattern. Count, honestly, cut hard, work longer, build a buffer, then build a modest capital base with realistic returns, and avoid any behavior that risks a blow-up you are too old to recover from. Fail to do those things, and your outcome is also the same pattern: dependence, anxiety, and constant crisis. Strip away all the commentary and the protocol comes down to a handful of rules. First, you face the numbers. Not next month. Not when you feel ready. Now. 1 page with income, expenses, debts, and assets. If you refuse this step, there is no protocol that can help you. You cannot fix what you insist on not measuring. Second, you destroy high-interest debt and swear off new consumer borrowing. If someone is charging you 25% to rent yesterday's lifestyle, that bill gets priority over every dream of investing. You do not carry balances at rates your capital cannot match. Debt that grows faster than your assets is the enemy. At your age, that enemy wins quickly. Third, you cut fixed costs until they match a life you can actually sustain on plausible late-life income. That almost always means cheaper housing and cheaper transportation. It might mean moving. It might mean sharing. It might mean swallowing status you've carried for decades. You do it anyway because the math does not care who you used to be. It only cares what you spend now. Fourth, you accept that work is not optional just because you turned a certain age. Retirement is no longer a date. It's a number. Until your guaranteed income plus a safe withdrawal from any savings you build can cover your lean cost of living, work continues in some form. You can choose the form. Light work, flexible work, low-stress work if you can find it. But you don't get to choose none without accepting the consequences. Fifth, you build an emergency buffer before you talk about compounding. 3 to 6 months of bare-bones expenses in cash or safe equivalents is not a luxury. It's the thin wall between you and being wiped out by routine bad luck. You don't ask that buffer to make you rich. You ask it to keep you from being forced into terrible decisions at gunpoint. Sixth, with whatever monthly surplus remains after the buffer and debt paydown, you build capital in simple, low-cost, understandable investments. Broad index funds. Maybe a few high-quality, boring businesses that you truly comprehend. No margin. No exotic products. No stock tips from strangers. You aim for 4. 6% real returns, not for heroic. Your contributions, not your cleverness. do most of the work. Seventh, you use the Social Security system or its equivalent intelligently. If your health and employment allow it, you delay claiming to increase your lifetime benefit. You treat that larger check at 68, 69, or 70 as a form of annuitized capital you earn by continuing to grind. If work is impossible, you claim earlier and adjust every other part of your life downward to reflect that reality. You do not spend an early, reduced benefit as if it were supplementary. For you, it is central. Eighth, you communicate with your family like an adult. You stop hiding. You stop quietly funding other people's lifestyles while you have none. You lay out what you are doing to avoid becoming their burden and what you can no longer do for them. You invite cooperation if they are willing, but you do not base your survival on their charity. That's not a plan. It's a hope, and a dangerous one. Ninth, you maintain your health as if it were a financial asset. Because it is. Every year you keep yourself able to work is a year your capital base can grow instead of being drained for medical costs. Every avoided illness, every pound not gained, every bad habit moderated or dropped is compounding in disguise, not glamorous compounding you can brag about. Quiet compounding in reduced bills and extended earning power. 10th, you outlaw financial fantasy. No more schemes, no more opportunities that require you to suspend common sense. When someone pitches you an answer that sounds too good for someone in your situation, assume it exists to exploit people exactly like you. Your remaining years are not an audition to prove how smart you can be. They are a test of whether you can finally stop being stupid. Put all of this together, and Munger's philosophy for the over 60, undersaved investor is ruthlessly consistent. This is no longer about maximizing upside. It is about minimizing the probability of catastrophe. You will not get rich in the time you have left, but you can still choose whether you age into bare bones independence or into complete dependency. That choice does not live in the market. It lives in your willingness to endure discomfort now to avoid humiliation later. Most people in your position will not do it. They will keep their illusions. They will avoid the numbers. They will cling to the house, the car, the vacations, and the fantasy that something will work out. Then one day, something will. Something will force them out of the house. Something will repossess the car. Something will end the job. And they will discover that mathematics was not bluffing. You don't have to end that way. You are too old to undo what you've done, but you are not too old to stop making it worse. Treat your situation as the emergency it is. Follow the protocol without flinching. And you give yourself the only gift that is still realistically on the table. A hard, modest, but self-respecting old age where you are not entirely at the mercy of others. Ignore it, and you will get the default outcome this system gives to people who insist on hope over arithmetic. At your age, you don't have more time to be clever. You have just enough time to stop being stupid. Use it.